So it really looks like cloud gaming will be the future of gaming, and it's been made even more evident now with this latest news that Sony will be working with Microsoft and their Microsoft Azure solutions in order to compete with the competition. It's really interesting when this came out because, as we know, Sony, well, PlayStation, I think specifically the division of Sony, has been really against working with anybody else. So for example, Microsoft works with Nintendo with having cross-play with their partnership and having Xbox achievements on your Nintendo Switch. And just that partnership alone is showing how open Microsoft is to working with the other companies to make one big community. So hearing this news that Sony and Microsoft are going to create a partnership, and Sony is going to be using the Azure cloud solutions in order to build a game streaming solution for, I'm assuming, the PlayStation 5, or maybe even just a standalone thing, was very, very surprising. Now, as we know, PlayStation has had a game streaming service for a while now with the PlayStation Now service, and you've been able to play games through your PlayStation 4 and have them streamed to your devices. And you don't need to download anything to start playing them. Personally, I've tried PlayStation Now. I did not like it. I found there was a lot of latency, and there were times where the resolutions of the games would really fall off, and I have a pretty strong internet connection. So clearly Sony knows deep down they don't have the infrastructure to be able to pull off a great game streaming service, especially with all the competition coming out. Now with that competition, we already know from E3 2018 that Microsoft is working on Project xCloud, which will be their game streaming service, but they're also going to be creating a really powerful next-gen console, as well as weaker ones that will probably, I'm guessing, will just be like streaming boxes, and then you'll have that really powerful one which will probably play discs and will be able to play everything in 4K 60 FPS, and you won't have to stream if you don't want to. And then we have Google Stadia, which was just announced by Google, and it is their streaming service where you will really just need a Chrome browser to be able to play games anywhere on your tablets, on your desktop browser, on your phone, and you'll be able to seamlessly switch between each device. And they showed it off, and it actually looked really cool if they can really pull this off consistently. They talked about the internet connection you're going to need, and to play games in 4K 60 FPS, you're going to need a 30 megabit per second internet connection. And if you want to play in 1080p 60 FPS, you'll just need a 25 megabit. Now going back to PlayStation, they've already announced the PlayStation 5 and the specs of the console, and it's going to be a very powerful console, and you're going to be able to have physical discs with this console, and you're going to even be able to play PlayStation 4 games on it. So you're not going to need their streaming service if you buy the PlayStation 5 and that's the only thing that you want, and you want to play the PlayStation exclusives. There's no way that's only going to be exclusive to the streaming. You're going to be able to play all of these games on your PlayStation 5 with discs if you don't have the strong enough internet connection to stream them. But obviously Sony knows, with all the competition coming out, they need to get into this streaming service, and they need to have a better service than PlayStation Now. Now this announcement with the Sony and Microsoft partnership came apparently as a big surprise to the PlayStation team. There was a new report from Bloomberg that has said that negotiations with Microsoft on the deal were largely done without the involvement of the PlayStation team. And here's another quote: "Negotiations with Microsoft began last year and were handled directly by Sony's senior management in Tokyo, largely without the involvement of the PlayStation unit, according to people familiar with the matter." Now this is really interesting because, as we know, Sony and PlayStation specifically, like I said, has been really against any working together with other companies. So maybe they thought that they just needed to step in, and that they didn't have the infrastructure to make their own gaming streaming service good enough that they could not involve the PlayStation team because they didn't want the backlash. And being the senior executives, they can go ahead and do that. Now, what else is really interesting is that right now the PlayStation Network is powered by Amazon Web Services. And as we know, Amazon is creating their own game streaming service, so it would have probably been really easy for Sony and PlayStation to just work with Amazon instead of working with Microsoft. And apparently they were in talks about this, but the deal broke down, and then they went over to Microsoft. Now, I mean, I don't really know why this would happen, especially since they're working together, but my theory is basically that Amazon wanted to have a share of the exclusives on their service when they release it, of the Sony exclusives, and Sony was probably like, no, we can't have that. Microsoft, on the other hand, you know, especially with Nintendo, because there's no way Nintendo would allow their exclusives on a Microsoft platform, we're probably okay with helping Sony and creating a partnership with them and creating a game streaming service and not having any access to any of their exclusives. So all of this is really just interesting to me because I want to see how it all plays out. We're going to have so many different game streaming services, and for me it's a little bit concerning because it kind of reminds me of where we are right now with PC, with things like the Epic Game Store and Steam and Origin and Uplay Store, and how Epic is getting exclusives. And if you want to play some of these PC games, you have to download all of these different launchers, and if you don't like a certain launcher but you want to play the game, you really have no choice. And I really hope that with these game streaming services, this is not how it goes, because, you know, with like Netflix, if you want to watch certain stuff that isn't maybe on Amazon Prime Video, you have to pay for both of these services. So it would suck if you had to pay for all of these different game streaming services because there was different games on each service that you wanted to pay. But we'll have to wait and see. Who knows how they're going to do it. Maybe you can pay for individual games and it won't even be that expensive, especially if you're just streaming them. But yeah, these are just my thoughts on this. With the future of cloud gaming servers, how is it going to affect the industry? It's really interesting how this is going to shape up. I would love to hear in the comments below what you guys think about this, and if you are excited for game streaming, or if you want to just stay totally physical with the PlayStation 5 and the next Xbox when they are eventually released.